Hello. Hello.
Hello from brunch.
Just trying to do a quickie here with the Quest Pro to see if I can enter what we do on Wednesdays. Hang on. It just didn't work earlier, so just wanted to check with you guys are here. Enter VR, loading. Yeah, okay, not working. We can look at that on Wednesday. How is everyone? How is everyone? That wasn't supposed to be a complicated question. I know
We're a tough
Fabien's,
audience.
I know Fabien's got a haircut. You know, there's probably going to be like a AR VR hairstyle soon where, the lower back has to be really short, and I feel that's probably what Fabian has done. Give me a headset cut, exactly.
It's the spring cut.
Spring cut. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that's a more normal way of saying it. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Frodo.
Did you see in the latest meeting report, it's taken into account the chat sessions?
No, I've been head down in a book.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's just that it's now referring to you much better.
Oh, good. Yeah, I tend to write.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
Peter's in a sea of code.
What's this?
There must be Peter's in a sea of code.
In a sea of code.
Yes, he's been head down in a sea of code, which
Have
sounds
you
like a song.
have you read the book? What's his name? The guy who wrote Satanic Verses. He also wrote a book on the origins of stories, the ocean of notions. I think you would get a kick out of it. I can't remember it. Anyway,
Yeah.
so Andrew, you are here. That's nice. I know Deanie will not be able to be here very much today, and Adam is doing kids things. He's going to try to join us more on this Wednesday and to be more involved in general. He's coming out of high season kid event time, which is good. So I sent out a call for part of our discussion today to be about talking about what the ultimate document might be. And this is obviously something we should, if you want to talk about it, should be talked about along the lines of real use cases. We have 3 use cases from Deanie. One of them is reading in order to write an article. We should probably also see if anybody has a more specific use case, like I'm reading and I want to learn this and I want to see this and that kind of stuff. But what's the feeling on talking a bit on throwing away all of history and reality and talking about ideal document? Grand silence. Well, the thing is, we have to deal with realities. But I've been writing this document to the Apple Vision team on issues from a developer's point of view. There are lots of little things that are clearly bugs, like too easily it follows my eye rather than the trackpad and so on. But if we're going to be thinking about how to really use the headset, how to really use these extended things, it's probably not going to be about reading and writing flat documents, right?
I think one of the downsides of relying on eye tracking is, well, for one, my eyes tend to flit around to look at different objects with shifting focus. And you even get that when you're reading, the way the eye scans on a page doesn't track neatly with the linear order of text. So that's probably causing a lot of issues there.
Yes.
Also, I don't think we should be limited. Your eyes can only be looking at one place at once. Now, imagine you say, have two different objects that you want to manipulate relative to each other. You can make two fists, and your left fist could be controlling the location of one object in a 3D space, and your right fist could control the location of the second object. You could bring them together, move them apart, and shift them around, manipulating two objects simultaneously. But again, that doesn't work with eyes, because unless you're going like cross-eye with each eye looking at something different, which I just shudder to think of what that would do to you long term, it doesn't work.
Completely agree, both as an idea and in terms of the reality. I have been putting the Vision Pro on a few people's heads lately, and it's been very disappointing. In one session, it just didn't work very well. The lady, she had cataracts, and that really threw off the eye tracking. My current experience of the eye tracking, even at the best of times, is not perfect. It's very often I'm looking to the thing next to the thing, exactly. And even worse, having developed Author and actually writing this message to Apple in Author, in Vision, even though I use a physical trackpad and keyboard, very often either the keyboard will pop up or the cursor will move to a different point because my eyes glance there rather than the trackpad. So these are the very specific things I'm trying to write down and tell Apple, if there's a trackpad attached, please try to reduce the influence of the eyes, absolutely. And I completely agree with you, Peter. We should be able to use both hands and not just sit there as a lame person would have to. You know, if you can't move your arms, absolutely, this is good. But if you can, you should. And I see Rob moving his arm now to get my attention, and that worked.
I want to say that as you get older, your eyes are sometimes not properly aligned. I get some double vision since my cataract surgery. And it makes it very hard to select items on, for instance, if you're trying to enter the password, the passcode in the Vision. I can see the top numbers and select them, but then if I try to go down to the next row, it very often jumps back up. And it's really not very useful.
Yeah.
I don't know what they can do about that, but that's going to eliminate people like me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Or seniors, yes.
it is an important issue because even me, who have good eyes, relatively speaking, it's too often. I mean, one thing I've asked them for is on iOS, we have the iOS menu, right? A context menu. I know you all know about it, but for the sake of illustration, just going to show you something here. So, opening a thing. Right, this is what we've managed to do in Author for iOS. You see, the context menu covers the whole screen. So, you know,
Yeah.
you can tell it's not so bad. But on the Vision, it's restricted to being quite small. So that means that that tiny, tiny little arrow to see more, you have to use it so often. And to get your eyes on that rather than next is really, really hard.
Yep.
So these are absolutely issues that they need to take into account. But hey, that's why they have us, right?
Do they know they have us?
They do. Obviously, Fabian, you're just confusing me there. Brando is on the team. And he, of course, he's doing specific work with WebXR, but also Bruce Horn is now fully on the team. So Bruce is the one who I'm sending this list to. Okay, to kickstart some discussion today, I just put a link in our chat. And I'm not saying we have to go on and on about this today, but if you could please have a look at the link.
We presume it should be available in Vision.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a, hang on, let me see if Leon, are you properly here? I'm not sure if you're fully, you're fully here. Okay, cool. Fabienne, you're here, right? Can you guys have a look at the link? So it's just to spur some things. Okay, I'll just give you the last. Hopefully I won't be speaking forever. Hopefully somebody will take over. But in the I'm just going to read something brief to you then. 1 second. So this is the scenario that I hope we can build. This is what I'm telling Apple. So this is a small bit in the Apple email. It's very relevant to us, I think. But yeah, what I hope we can build as a community is something like this. You're sitting at your desk at a coffee shop table or at your office. You've decided to use one of the wonderful environments native to the Vision Pro. So when you put it on, you have a beautiful vista stretching for most of your view with the table cut out so you can see your keyboard, trackpad, and of course, coffee and water. This is instead of, or in addition to, being able to twist the digital crown to indicate how much of your view should be artificial. In the distance, you have a spatial video of yourself recorded play in a frame on a loop, audio off, of one of your favorite spots, just because it feels nice to have it. You then also have the option to tune in to live spatial video from stations playing in the background, but you've decided not to do that today because you are working. One of these can be your headquarters. So you can actually have like an ambient link to your office. And now it's getting closer to relevance of us. On the other side of your table, you have an artificial item, unlike Quest augmentations. In this case, it's an owl, in brackets, do you like our owl? And you all better get that reference. This is so weird. The synchronization between Vision and Mac is not always perfect. It has lost some edits, so I apologize. Anyway, not much more to read. This is one of several trusted agents. You give full access to your workspace, library, calendar, etc., so it can offer you perspectives on the work you're doing. Since it's on an Apple device, consumers feel safe that the data is processed on device. Sometimes we choose to have 2 of these agents and even 3, so you can get a more balanced perspective. And since they share data, they can map out things for you. That's cool, right? Yeah. There's a lot of stuff missing here. With the synchronizations.
Road, are you trying to screen share something by any chance?
No, I'm not. Thank you for checking.
Okay.
I was just going to read something, but okay, I'll just have to do it from memory. Clearly something's gone with the synchronization. Anyway, so this is the kind of scenario in here that's hopefully going to spur our conversation. The idea is that this person's task is to write a report having been to an academic conference. So they will have to do a little bit of writing, a little bit of speech to text, also probably video and images, and some citations for papers from the conference. However, this conference was in a very special place. It was in Rome, where Rob and I were. And therefore, maybe you want to include some spatial videos and make it a bit more lively, this document. So we could imagine that person sitting and having a map of where they were, looking at where they took certain pictures and models and so on, and they can fit it onto the map if they want, put it into their paper, do all these fun things so that when they share their documents, it can be read as a traditional flat document, and when opened up in some sort of a headset thing, can be opened for fully spatialized experience. That's the thing. We want to make that possible, right? Can I like get thumbs in some kind of direction? We want to be able to provide a means to make spatialized documents, and not in a cumbersome macromedia flash kind of a way, but in a really engaging, more simple way, right? Okay. Peter's got all kinds of hands up.
Okay, one of the things my ideal document would have are multiple, possibly different formalized blocks of content that are parsable. And that just sort of goes back to the original Apple data detector concept, where it would recognize phone numbers and recognize addresses, but we can do that a lot more detail and a lot higher level of richness and fidelity now. You could imagine having island grammars. And the idea of an island grammar is a grammar that can recognize a structured glob of language in the middle of a large sea of unrelated content. So the idea is you basically assume that everything isn't recognized, and as you're looking at each character, you look ahead a arbitrary distance to see whether what's immediately following the character you're currently at is something that's recognized by this island grammar. And if it is, it then goes and recognizes that grammatical construct, and it knows there's some piece of formal language in here that is structured that I recognize, and it pulls that piece out as a data element, and then it looks for more stuff it doesn't recognize until it finds another piece that matches that grammar. And that means that with island grammars, you can have multiple grammars applied to the same overall document. So we can have our generic document, and then we can have our citation language looking for citation references. We can have a discourse representation language looking for structured breaks. Now we're talking about, now we're going to digress into whatever and recognize that and pull that out as data. Then you could take that data and have a standoff representation of it so that you can have overlying things recognized. So we might have names recognized, and you'd also have academic citations recognized. So that means for a given citation, you would both simultaneously be adding the names from the citation to your block of names that have been extracted from this document, publishers to a separate block of publishers, and then each one of those lists could then be flown out into 3D space and stuck on the wall somewhere where you're interested. And that could be live, so that as you're typing or pulling in data, you're constantly looking at it, parsing it for the different subgrammars that you can recognize, and extracting data from that. So that would be a crucial element of my ultimate document. It wouldn't just be a block of text for another human to read. It would also have software agents continuously monitoring it, pulling out things of value, possibly putting them into feeds that someone else could subscribe to. So then I could have like an ambient display, and I could be looking for, say, just author names. And maybe I have 30 people's activity that I'm monitoring, and the brightness of Michael Benedict shows up, and it starts getting really bright and pulsing maybe. And that could tell me that a few other people just happen to be simultaneously looking at citations that are connected to that particular author. And that could, in an ambient way, draw my attention to, gee, maybe I want to pull out and see what he's doing. And also, I want to have fine-grained privacy. Sometimes I actually want people to know exactly what I'm doing in a fine level of detail. When I'm researching a programming problem or something, I would love to have anyone in the world who's working on a similar problem to be able to dial into what I'm doing and merge what they're doing with what I'm doing. Whereas other times, if I'm researching, say, a legal topic for a friend who asked me a law question, I'd want to make sure that absolutely no one knows what that is, and have a nice big cone of privacy dropped over my head so that that activity would be completely opaque to the outside world and wouldn't appear in the record anywhere, or would only appear in a secured record of, my legal activity. And then I could maybe have my legal document tracking all of my legal activity that only I'd be able to see, or another attorney that I'm collaborating with on a given project. So you have that fine-grained security issue, and you want to be able to voluntarily expose stuff. That was something that always frustrated me with library catalogs, was how they just completely blew away the opportunity to get collaboration amongst the users of the catalog. Beautiful case in point, many years ago, my library was discarding a cookbook, and it was a cookbook from the Revolutionary War period that had been in the collection for a long time. I mean, it could be considered, a treasured archive item that if the Smithsonian got their hands on it, they would want to catalog and add into a special exhibit someday on, domestic activity and culinary experiences at the time of the founding. But instead, the librarian explained to me that the decision was made because it involved having herbs, and one of the recipe was basically an herbalist approach for a medically induced abortion. So they didn't want
Peter,
anyone to get it,
I
because
think
if
that
they
the
made
rabbit
that
hole is
recipe,
getting quite deep when we're going into pre-revolutionary
basically-
war cookbooks.
yeah, so basically if they were to cook that recipe and they were pregnant, it could cause a miscarriage, and therefore, based on that strength, they pulled the book. Whereas they could have augmented the catalog with that information, made the book available with a medical warning that could be automatically generated by the system saying, hey, if you're pregnant or want to be having a pregnancy develop in the near term, you don't want to use, the recipe on page 16. Everything else in the book is wonderful, but that recipe in page 16 could cause you serious issues. And instead, their choice is pull the book entirely or leave the book on and risk a patron having a disaster.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a
Then
lot
with
of
the brain dump.
perspectives. But what I took from that, one of the key things is you want to be able to have the data in the documents have programmatic and semantic meaning so that it can be used programmatically like this, right?
Yep, exactly.
So one thing I want to ask you all in the context of the ideal document is to look at a very, very traditional document, and that is the document I sent you of our record, because I think there's a relevant point there. I will give you a Dropbox link if you don't already have it. That'll be real quick. The reason for this is this document of our meetings is very close to what we've been trying to do for the last few years. Hang on, I got the link. And that is each meeting, obviously it's changed a little bit over time, but it's not just one prompt, it's several. So please tell me when you have it up on your screen and boring old PDF, and then I'll tell you why it's relevant to this. You all have it up? Okay, right. So go to page 81, please. 13th of March, Wednesday. I talked a little bit with Adam about this earlier before his family and children thing started this evening. We talked many times about having a sort of a timeline thing. So this is how can we store it in this and how can we view it? So if we look at page 81, 13th of March, it has a link to the transcript and the video right there. Then it has a list of who it thinks was in the meeting. And it has a very brief intro summary. All that's fine. But then on the next page, we have Andrew update, which is copied and pasted for what Andrew has written, and a link to the demo itself. Obviously only available for the Wednesdays. And Wednesdays were initially supposed to be secret, not recorded. Most of them are recorded. None of this will be made public until we've all had a look and made sure there's nothing in here that we feel shouldn't be public. That includes the transcript, video, everything. So then we have what's getting really interesting for our XR work. Speaker summary, it's per speaker. And again, this is all one prompt with all of these. And then we have topics discussed. That's what I'm using now. But we could, of course, choose to ask it for other specific topics and then run it through again. We have then what's really interesting, names mentioned. So it's most of them. And I really want to emphasize that after today's meeting, as going forward, I will try to do this as quickly as possible, send it to you, so you can have a look at how you are reflected and see if it disagrees with you, in which case I will change it immediately. You can also, if you have notes in the meeting that you want manually added, I'm very happy to do that. This doesn't need to be pure AI, right? So the names mentioned is very listy, which is good. Then we have agreements, disagreements, URLs, and suggested next agenda. So the point is, doesn't this become something we can consider having a really rich view in XR space for? At a minimum, look by date, or look by names mentioned, or look by this, that, and the other. What do you think? So what I did as well, since you're all being very quiet, I took this final document and uploaded it to Claude. Hi, Deanie.
Hey.
Hi. I just talking to the group about a little bit of we're talking about a little bit of document formats and things. So I reshared our record because it's so many headings, so we can maybe represent it in XR in different ways, just as a way to talk about format. So as a provocation, I took that document back into Claude and I asked it, what is Fabien's perspective on WebXR in relation to text? I'm not going to read all of it, but it's Fabien, you are here. Tell me if it's got it completely wrong. He emphasized the complexity and importance of responsive content in XR environments and the need for accessible and semantically annotated content. That was March 4th. He suggested exporting data from the XR system to popular academic tools like Zotero and Mendeley to make the project more useful for the intended audience, March 27th, etc. So it seems to me that we have all this data now, and going forward, we will, and just to repeat it for you, Dini, this report, I will try to send it out as quickly after each meeting so we can all look and see if there is a mistake. And we should all feel free to add anything, just email me and I'll put it in. So we have this stuff and it's categorized. So we should be able to have a very, very useful way to view this in XR. That's all.
Good, thank you.
Rob, please.
I'm looking at the document and I go to a date and I'm looking at stuff. I would like access to the table of contents, otherwise I have to jump back to the beginning to select another option.
There should be a table of contents. Yeah,
Oh, there
at the
is, but
very,
it's at the beginning, just in the sidebar.
yeah. If you want, if you're reading it on Reader, do Command minus and it'll fold out to a table of content.
Okay, yeah, all right. It says come back here.
The reason I think this is a bit interesting for us to think about is partly we are dealing with ACM hypertext document. That is our core knowledge. Normally, they are released as individual PDFs. However, last year it was also released as one compendium. So it was like a magazine of all the proceedings for that conference, which was very cool. That is quite similar to our book, which is a lot of articles by different people. So all of these things that are sectionized, because a normal hypertext academic document, it doesn't have that many pages. So the table of contents or headings aren't that useful relative to a major work. So if we think of in terms of a major work of 2 meetings every week for 6 to 9 months, which roughly will be September, that's a real amount of data. So to make this readable in a spatialized environment, doesn't that excite everyone? I can see gears moving in some of the foreheads. What do you think, Dini?
Sounds great. I mean, it's going to make the report easier to write.
Yeah, the report should hopefully mostly write itself, I hope. And it's, yeah, I mean, I just find it absolutely gobsmacking. So as some of you, all of you probably will remember, there was a discussion, a disagreement between Brandel and me about the use of a word a few weeks ago. And that was recorded, and I looked at the transcript for that meeting. And the way Claude understood it was really frightening almost. Because in the disagreements and agreements, it was mentioned as, you know, the use of this word. However, in the summary, it actually took it up a notch and said, you know, there was some disagreement on the use of language. That's like near basic human analysis, isn't it?
If we get gender right, it'll be just fine.
I didn't hear you. What?
If we get gender right, it'll be just perfect. They keep calling me he.
Oh, it's done a few things like that. Dini, that's a very good example of what needs to be fixed. It also got Fabien's last name wrong mostly.
Yeah.
So could you please just drop me an email, because I'll do all this in bulk. I will put into the prompt more of who we are, because it does use that. If you look at the last page of the document, I have written a little bit about what these meetings are about to help the summaries be more useful. So
Mhm.
you should definitely not have Dini as anything other than Dini.
Well, I think that's just one example. Today I'm doing this external review of a dissertation, and this person is working on an AI engine for being able to discern emotion from images using, kind of a system they're building themselves. And they're doing it's a huge literature review on all these different AI products. And the one they're building as a team is this one to recognize emotion in paintings, which I think is interesting. And so reading all of the kind of problems with systems has just been on my mind for the past week as I'm reading through this document. So it's interesting.
It is, and that's almost the reverse of what Leon asks in the chat here. Has there been any reports of AI infographic generators, as in generating images based on the text? I've tried a little bit of that. So far, it's been not good. But I do think that is absolutely something we should try to do, to figure out how to make it more visual.
And just so
Yeah.
you know, the reports for these kind of grants they're so mind numbing. And having to go back through all the archives, I'm trying to keep a running tab of what's happening, but the reports that we're getting from Claude are much better. But I will have to go through and clean up things, so it's not really a done deal, but it's just a hell of a lot easier.
Yes, absolutely agree with you. But and today's discussion, at least for a little while, Dini, is what would, if we throw away all the rules and everything, what would be the ideal document? Right? If we just think about document and we have very little preconceived notions, and one of the ideas is you're writing up a report from the ACM Hypertext Conference in Rome. So in addition to writing and speaking into this thing, you should be able to include spatial videos and all kinds of things, because Rome is a special place. I'm using where you and Rob and I were last year as kind of a case study. And if you take that in addition to headings and other keywords, it isn't crazy to look at delivering this as a flat document, but also as someone puts on their headset and opens it there, that this opens in a beautifully spatialized way. I really think we can do make some headway in that and make it much more compelling.
What's going to be helpful is because the report is very focused, right? They'll have categories we have to respond to. So we could take we can put into the query the different elements and then feed the document that the AI has already produced, so we can restructure it into the kind of process that needs to be delivered to Sloan.
Yeah,
So the AI on AI doc to the AI engine.
yes, no, absolutely. That's what I did with the example Fabian question. But Dini, each meeting is of course one transcript in Claude. So if there's anything that you think should be asked of the transcript for your report, please tell me and I'll put it in the prompt now.
Well, some of it is things that we're not even talking about as a group, is budget expenditures. I mean, it's stuff that we're not doing here, right? So we're not gonna be able to capture that information, but yeah. And I haven't seen the report document yet. I haven't seen it in the portal.
Okay. All right. Okay, Fabian, I'm going to pick on you. So this ultimate document, it needs to contain Fabian blocks. What would that mean in this context?
Since you pick on me, I can say what I think. To me, the ultimate document is probably an HTML page. I have a bias because that's what I work with, but you can have video, you can have sound, you can have 3D models, you can have internal references, external ones. You can reshape its flow so that it looks a certain way on one device or another. You can have it local, you can send it to someone else, or you can host it. So it's a bit boring of me to say this, but And of course, one thing that when I was whining a long time ago that books should be dead because they're not interactive enough. And I think when the purpose is learning, interaction should be there. And again, an HTML page allows this. It allows to have plain old text, but also interaction thanks to code. So yeah, to me, the ultimate document is an HTML page, and it's something with that changes over time. Like HTML when the web started is not HTML today. But yeah, to me, I have a hard time imagining beyond an HTML document. I'm sorry.
That's okay, because with all due loving respect, and I'll give you a hug when you're here, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is ignoring the storage mechanism. And I know I'm one of the ones that talk about that a lot. So it's really a hypothetical thing. I agree with all the attributes, Fabian, that you prioritize. I prioritize the same. So the question is really, okay, I'll do it quickly in 3 parts. Number one, my advisor, Wendy, many years said she doesn't have time to write anymore. She just wants to be able to put things into a document, like a tweet or whatever, right? So I'm thinking the composing of it should be fun and engaging. Like early HTML design applications like Go Live and that kind of stuff. You put things in, almost like blocks, and you get a document, you thread it together and so on. The storage mechanism, whether it's PDF, HTML, or database, right now I don't care about at all. But the key should be that when you're on a tablet, a computer, or an XR, you can access it. And the best experience should probably be an XR. So I could imagine you're actually authoring this with a headset, and you are manually, if you want, putting pictures here and this there and whatever, and assigning code to specific things and all of these cool things. So to be able to store that somehow and share it is really what we're talking about. And yeah, we can make the working assumption this is all HTML. That's not a problem. But how amazing should it be when we open this kind of thing? Like, imagine this report from Rome, because it's got a little bit of everything in it. So there's a little bit of type, a little bit of just voice, a couple of citations, because it's academic, right? But when you do this, you want to be able to say, this article, which I miniaturized and put up here, arrow, goes against this one. And then you pull out the data from this one and say, look at the data there. You know, this kind of theatrical stuff. We want it to be something you go into, and it is alive and active and understandable as a modern computer game.
Leon's question is a good one. Should the ideal document have pages and unlimited canvas? You know it's interesting, Leon, that's a question I ask all the time, because in breadcrumbing, we would probably expect pages, and over time we would get rid of pages, right? But to get people from point A to point B, it's hard just to drop them into a space where the whole system is different. But breadcrumbing is a term we use to that, like, for example, when we were training students for web-based writing back in the day, we just didn't throw them into HTML. We tried to show them how to read an HTML page, explain what HTML is, and then take them step by step to an empty space where they start to code. So it's leaving breadcrumbs like Hansel and Gretel in the forest so that somebody can follow, right? So it's following. In web design, breadcrumb is the kind of the thing on the interface that allows a user to follow your path, right? So what you don't do is just throw an audience into a brand new space and go, here we go. I mean, even Apple didn't do that. I mean, when you get into the Apple headset, you see the same kind of interface that you see with your phone and your computer, right? At some point, it's going to be different. But for the moment, it has to be somewhat familiar so that people can cognitively make sense of the system. But at some point, we will let go of those prior systems because we don't need them anymore. We don't do page numbers in web pages, for example. But in the early days, we struggled with how to designate a page space, right? So it's that kind of thing. But so, yeah, the question is, how do you design for this new world? And I'd like to think we're going to come up with something so different that it's that we've left the past behind and we're making use of the affordance of this space in a really amazing way. We're not there cognitively yet. At least most of us aren't. Rhoda?
I would say that on this issue, addressability is really, really key. Obviously, partly to cite something, you need to, in many cases, be able to say what you're citing inside a document. But also, if you want to interact with it, you need to be able to address it somehow. So addressability should be at least to the paragraph level, maybe to the sentence, maybe to the word level. How we do that, how we interact with it, how we allow the user, the reader, and the author to deal with it. Peter saying he'd want embedded quotations to be directly addressable. Yes, like what did Ted call it? Transclusions, right? These are really, really important aspects. The point is that we need to decide on the ultimate of this at some point, at least as an exercise. Right? So imagine this report from Rome. How could we make it incredibly compelling? Let's say that similar to our record, the person writing this report recorded all the presentations, all the meetings they were part of, and went through the process we've done, so that there is names have been extracted, some summaries have been done. Couldn't you imagine kind of, yeah, so Rob just wrote, a weird idea would be a memory palace. No, absolutely, Rob. So when we were in Rome, we were in physically different rooms depending on the conversation. So an example could be to have a model of the physical location we were in and having notes about what we saw in those two different rooms. We could make it incredibly non-virtual, incredibly physical related, so we could actually see the YouTube videos of the presentations presented in the rooms they were from. We could, you know, if we were talking to a friend in the back of the room or writing a note, we could find it there. And then we could flip it into all kinds of things. This is exactly what we're thinking about. Fabienne, please.
Yeah, to clarify also a bit, one of the reason, or quite a few of my prototype are, it's not memory palace, but it's trying to find spatial representation of not necessarily the content of the document, but at the very least its structure. And quite often when I show things like this, then people think of memory palaces. Memory palaces are usually done in order to remember unstructured data, things that are, I don't want to say so dismissively, but it's kind of like a party trick to remember things that are not really supposed to be there together, like a kind of grocery list. And I'm not saying it's not interesting in terms of how our mind can do so much more that when we use the right process, it's interesting. But in my opinion, it's not as interesting as finding the structure behind the data. I mean, once you do, then you don't necessarily need to use the tricks of the memory palace. One warning though is that works well when your structure is stable. I don't know, it's like a tree, for example, and it has a certain shape, so branches go a certain way, so that when you do it a couple of times, you go back to it and it's easy to remember. But when you data or change every day, then maybe the structure also you need to reconsider what it is, and then the shape, the layout you will have then in the environment can be completely different from one day to the next, and then you're basically lost in space virtually, and it becomes very difficult then if it changes quite a bit over time. But yeah, spatially you're going from the structure of a document to a layout we can navigate. In my opinion, it's indeed quite interesting. From my experience, it has some limitation though.
Yes. This is exactly the discussion. So there's one memory palace that's quite physical. There's also data memory palaces. Like I could imagine literally a plant, a tree in the corner of our room. That is our discussion. And each little branch represents one of the people. And we can have keywords around this thing as kind of magnets, as little suns to draw it out. And then we can see if something changes over time, right? That is one thing that I've been doing with this Claude thing. And it was a little bit generic, saying we're more focused on specifics of implementation for Sloan now rather than general before. But tracking the changes, whether it's AI or more crystal clear data or whatever, absolutely. And it can be done in so many different and cool ways. The little scenario that I mentioned in the beginning of having an owl on the desk that is actually a local LLM, each one of them could maybe, if you have many, could be trained on the different people in the group, what they've said. So when you're going through something new, you might get different reactions from these different ones, like the Leon one, maybe, you know, cocking its head sideways when we're saying something weird about URLs, and then we can examine it based on that. We got to think like way beyond Harry Potter, way beyond Blade Runner, just into really cool land of how we can view our stuff.
I think it'll be interesting to be able to say, you know, we have our goals and we put our goals into the system and then we say, where in the document do we show we met this goal? And it designates that, right? And so we can go back and say on this day, at this time, we discussed this goal, that we achieved this goal, and here's how we discussed achieving it. And that will be very useful for the final report, which is usually about 20 pages long or so. But for our own notifications, like when do we make a change? Like when do we realize at this juncture, this is the decision? We had to make this decision then. And once we made that decision, we couldn't go back.
Yeah,
So branching.
Yeah, that's really perfect, Danny. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
Right. That's okay. Just branching narrative.
So one of the things I've asked the current thing to do is give us a suggested agenda for next week or next meeting. What we can start doing is taking our actual agendas into it and see if we, you know, how in the meeting we fulfill the agenda. But also by having explicit goals, and Dini, you're right, we haven't seen exactly what they are according to Sloan yet, but we should be able to put them in. And we should be able to, if someone, let's say Dini, or Dini and me being co-PIs, maybe we're designated in the prompt as in people who can say whether something is done. And all we need to do in a meeting is say, this is now done, or we now agree. And that is then put in the record. And then we can see that. Now, before I turn off recording, because I see Fabienne has something cool here, I just wanted to mention that the record as we have it now, every Wednesday, there's a link to what Andrew has done for that Wednesday. So in our XR Amazing view of this thing, we have one-click access to going into what Andrew has built. I mean, that's freaking awesome, right? So we're not just reading a report in the headset. It was like, what did he do? Click, boom, we're here. Can I have some massive, yeah, thank you, Dina. You're the only one smiling. Come on, guys, that's amazing, right? And with the stuff that you're doing, Fabienne, same thing. When you have something you want to have on the record, as long as it's been in our chat or you've told me, people going through the record, reading all this stuff. Okay, let's look at what Leon has written, and then we'll do Fabienne's screen off. He says, perhaps the document should allow hassle-free editing in all three dimensions. Absolutely. But also be able to accept the grammar to store the structure of future content. Yes, bullet points is basically hard-coded grammar in current documents. We need loosely coupled ones. Yeah, Leon, you're so absolutely on my wavelength. And I look so much, by the way, we have booked for Future Text Social. It's going to be at the last weekend of May. Europeans are coming. The rest of you, if you can make it miraculously, please do. It'll be awesome. So, Leon, we will discuss these points. The biggest thing that I would want to change right now in a document is to be able to choose to show a bullet point list or just the first with ellipsis, to have that expandable, contractible as a normal way of writing. Of course, you can make it happen in HTML, but so often you have a long list, but you don't want to see it all the time. So that detail, yeah, spot on. Any other comments before we go secret Fabienne mission 007?
meeting is being recorded.
So in a generic way, what Fabian just showed us is a document in a space, a real space with a real document, which is why I couldn't show it. It was fantastic. One of the things I really liked is you click on a document to teleport yourself to standing in front of it, which is just elegant. One thing that immediately springs to mind is the notion of having different reading rooms that we've talked about before. So let's say we have an ACM hypertext reading room that has specific resources for those documents. So they can be presented in a similar way that we just saw on beautiful posters. And they can also have in that room, because you don't have so much motion sickness, but clicking to jump to teleport. And also little things like these documents need to have full metadata. So if there is a page above it, it should be easy to have the headings if need be, or whatever else. I could talk for an hour about this, Fabian. This is amazing. I would really like someone else to talk. Sorry, just too amazing.
Can I say something? Go ahead, Rob. Rob, talk.
I just wanted pop-up headers as you go over the page, because you can't see what it's about. So if you go until you go in, so.
I was going to say that the breadcrumbing is there. So Fabienne, do you see what I mean by breadcrumbing? Because you still have the documents in succession, right? It looks like the original document except spread out over a space. But at some point, we'll probably just have text just floating in space like I'm imagining it for myself, right?
Yeah, just also in terms of text floating in space, it's like the post-it note I used like I think 2 weeks ago. I think it's same like using a real world architecture or building or room is to me like using post-it. It's to help people get or remember how familiar they are already with manipulating documents in space. Like we already do this, like same whiteboard and all this kind of stuff. But if you have literally the text floating in space, most people then, to me, are still confused or surprised or not sure what to do with it. So I think, yeah, it's to help maybe for more gentle transition. And then, yeah, the text itself can float, can be different shape also, doesn't have to be flat. I mean, we can go, I think Adam also did a lot of very interesting demos a long time ago where the text did not have to be flat. So it completely, I mean, it begs for different experiences, but as a gentle transition, I find that so far that's been helpful.
Has anyone ever read the story? I might have mentioned this before to some of us, but The Arrival science fiction story turned into a movie. It was about
Just a movie.
the aliens that thought in 3 dimension, and the way they saw the world was totally different than the way we saw the world. And once we adopted their language, it changed the way we functioned and it had to do with the way they saw time, right? Time and language go hand in hand. And for us, time is linear. There's a past, present, future. And for that world that thought in 3D, time collapsed into itself, right? And I think that's part of what I'm interested in with all of this notion of text in VR and XR. So what does it mean when we start to play with text? What's the back of text look like? When you look down at text, what is it? How does it structure our minds? And yes, this is navel gazing. I totally get that. But I think this is the interesting part about what we're doing is the intellectual part is how is it changing the way we think? And Frode, we did talk in our grant about the notion of how we think is associated with how we see text and think different. So how are we going to be thinking different in this new space? Right now, we're not thinking so different, right? We're trying to breadcrumb things. But at some point, we're going to be moving beyond where we came from, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're talking about today, about what would an ultimate document be. And when I was in art school, Chelsea School of Art, a long time ago, I remember doing a thing, and then I did a thing and a thing, and my teacher said, at some point, you got to stop. You got to frame it. You got to end it. And that's when I say document, that's all I mean. That is some boundary set on knowledge or information. Whether it's in what we call a document now or a database set or whatever, I don't care for this discussion because I agree very much with Dini. We need to get, the Rival talks about 3D texts. Apple likes the word spatial. So let's just use the Apple word for right now and say we need to further develop spatialized thinking and communication, right? Oh, Leon, okay, all right, we'll see you soon. Thank you for being here. And then Fabian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, to me, the equivalent or the analogy of a rival would be I hope, initially when I started to work in XR, it was, like I said, to organize my posters and my notes all around me in space. Now I'm starting to think, well, still that, but also more specifically in terms of like weirder, I guess, or more unique, again, for arrival and time and the kind of circling glyphs. It would be for me managing, again, grammars, like the relationship between items within a domain, again, being chemistry, being knowledge, being whatever, because it's so abstract. But I think if you can make it, again, not tangible, but at least give affordances to it, both visually and with hand tracking or eye tracking, whatever, but to be able to manipulate such grammars, I think it would be quite powerful. So if again, there is a kind of way to change how we manipulate symbols and to open up, maybe not a new way to think, but at least to facilitate it to the point that it enables usage that were until now practically impossible. That's what I'm betting on, basically.
I agree.
Yeah, I heartily agree as well. So why don't we, this is not changing any of our Sloan stuff, but why don't we just say that for our Sloan presentation is September. The corpus we primarily deal with is this year's papers. And we obviously will get the HTML versions of it so we can have some standard views in our ACM hypertext library. In that library, there will be different modes of reading, including what we're working on right now to go into fully immersive mode for a paper. And also, and this is just me being controversial, depends on what Dini says, we also invite everybody writing a paper to say if there's something they would like to spatialize about it. And if so, we will try to accommodate that. And finally, in addition to having the room with the papers, different ways to read them, including Andrew's immersive, we could also have a thing which allows them to explore our dialogue over the last many months. So that becomes another component.
We also need to do testing. So one of the things that we have some money for is the testing, usability testing. So we want to do that and set that up. And I imagine we'll do that in a demo. So the Blue Sky paper deadline's coming. It's not passed. So imagine what you're talking about, Frode, for the paper is the Blue Sky, which is perfect for what we're doing because we don't really have final data, which is what a regular paper would be. And then we submit a demo, and the demo would include the testing aspect. Is that what you're imagining?
It's compatible with what I'm imagining, but what I'm really imagining is, and again, not disagreeing with any of that, I'm just thinking, how absolutely amazing would it be? And oh yeah, first of all, an important aside, I've been putting the Vision Pro on people's heads lately, and it's been relatively disastrous. First of all, it takes so many minutes to do all of that and teaching them the pinching. A lot of people, they can't pinch clearly like this. Once they know they don't have to reach out, they make these minuscule things. The eye tracking is most certainly not perfect. The basic interfaces are... Anyway, I do think we're going to be using a lot of these guys as the primary demo material, and that's absolutely fine using the Quest Pro and the Quest 3. But what I'm really thinking about, someone puts on the headset there, and they're in a library of sorts. Maybe we make it actually your office, Dini, because it's beautiful. So for the sake of argument, we scan your office completely, and then we have, completely skeuomorphic to begin with. We make it as physical looking as possible. And then we start doing the kind of Fabienne interactions. And then, portals and so on. But just make it, this is the current proceedings. This is why you're here. We make it so amazing and we make it public so that people at the conference will, when they're not with us, go to their own headsets to read the papers because it's better than reading it on a PDF. That's one dream.
Fabienne?
So one quick example also in terms of testing that I think was, in retrospect, it's obvious, but the document in space I've shown before. So initially, I did what I thought was the simplest interaction for my audience, namely you move the pointer. When you hover, you see a highlight. When you click, you get there. Honestly, I was happy with it. I thought this works, and people who tried it also. But then they scrolled because a lot of people in traditional settings, they're on the web or they have a PDF, and going down or reading further means scrolling down. That's like number one interaction. And I was like, shit, that makes sense. But this is not how I move in 3D. So it's very linear. It's not even 2D, it's 1D anymore. Like you go down a tour basically. But that's how people wanted to interact with the space. So I did not like it initially, and then I was like, it doesn't matter what I like. That's what the audience wants. So then initially I was like, also shit, I don't know how to implement this, and actually found a trick. Like it took literally 2 lines of code, so that was actually super easy to accommodate them. And it's a totally new mode of interaction, but it works. So that was one very good thing, and I had no intelligence in that. It's like literally testing and people telling me the scroll wheel doesn't work. I'm like, what do you mean the scroll wheel doesn't work? It's not supposed to work. So testing is super valuable in such cases, and same testing ideally literally sitting behind the person, because I had another thing like this where the person tried to experience this with a tablet, and then they tried to pinch to zoom in, and I was like, that also makes complete sense. Like I did not have a touchscreen when I designed this demo, so I thought just scroll wheel, and after actually somebody asked for it, and clicking. But when you have the affordance when your device, pinch, and to see the person do it, exactly same reaction, like, whoa, shit, that makes sense. I should have done it. So I'm just trying to highlight there that testing can give some really good ideas, and also they can be very also easy to implement. It's not because it looks totally different, and the way to, it's not always like this. Obviously, there are a lot of times it's like, yeah, no, that's a great idea, or it's a perfectly valid need, but never going to, I don't even know how to do this. But those couple of times there was a way to, and again, the goal there, sorry, to summarize it, by testing and ideally in person, you get so many quality ideas for the audience, but also it doesn't mean the initial way to interact, same as before about floating text. You go with the document that looks like a document, a post-it note that looks like a post-it note, and then you depart from that. When the person has been convinced that they can actually interact with it and there is value within that space to interact with the document, you can go crazier, let's say. So now that, let's say, scroll wheel works, then I can say at the end of the tour, hey, you can also use your mouse to click around and freely move around, and your arrow keys to move around. So it's like teaching them, the audience that wanted a linear experience, that sure, that works, but you can also go deeper and have generally novel ways to interact. And I think this way, rather than forcing onto them from the start a new way to interact, so far it looks like a much easier path.
Right. Andrew and Fabienne and Peter particularly, I uploaded a HTML version of our meeting record. So if you want to have a look and see if it's relevant, if the the headings are supposed to be, and they look like they are properly H1, H2, which should make it more parsable in the space. So with what you've said then, Fabienne, okay, so Dini, I'll tell you my dream and see, I'm sure we agree mostly, but just to make sure. How about we, okay, first of all, the meeting record is reading in XR, so I do think that's Sloan related. Academics have meetings too, so obviously, so if academics can see our process for dealing with our meetings, it may very well be interesting for them to use. I think that kind of reading is as important as reading papers. There's no JSON version, no. No, actually, I don't know. Hang on. Maybe I can do a JATS. 1 second here. That's a very pertinent question. Okay, I don't know if this is, I'm sorry. This is just Peter's very useful request. Okay, I'm uploading an XML version of it. Right. Anyway, so Dini, what do you think, first of all, of having the idea of scanning, let's say, your office and having two major things to read in there? One, the proceedings, two, our meeting record. But reading it in far beyond any way you can read in platform today.
You know what I'd like to do? I totally disagree. I totally agree with that. What I'd like to do though is offer them two or three possibilities to get a sense of what people really, if we give them one thing, then we're testing one thing. But I'm wondering if what we're, the question is, what are we testing? Right? What is it we're trying to test? The efficacy of reading in online spaces, the virtual spaces, reacting to them. Is it trying to get a sense of where we're going in the future? I mean, if the notion is what lies ahead and how are we going to think beyond where we are currently, which is what we argue we're trying to do, and go beyond what Apple and companies are. So why not offer maybe 2 or 3 visions? Like, here's a room, here's the text, let's experience that. Now here's that same text in a different scenario, right? Here's that same text in a different scenario, and get a sense of, and we can essentially breadcrumb them ourselves and get a sense of where people are currently and what they're going to accept as we move forward. And I know that's going to take a little longer, but I'd rather do a more deeper dive than to say, hey, put this headset on. And I can say this because I just read through this dissertation again yesterday and reading through all their testing data. 24 people digging deep into an AI system, as opposed to hundreds of people. They weren't using big data sets. They're using small data sets that looked really deeply at what people were thinking as they were working through the system that they were building. And I think that's a very efficient way and a very interesting way. And since we're not just testing once, we have testing that's ongoing. It wouldn't be bad to try this more broader sense. And I just pick like 10 people, 10 really great people to put into the headset. People that might already have experience with VR, so we're not teaching them how to like pinch. Because our audience is a little bit more savvy than someone in a coffee shop or a student that never put on a headset before. This is a great opportunity to work with really smart people with a lot of talent to think about this system and who know already what ACM hypertext papers look like. And how do they really want to experience this in a different space? I just think it's an opportunity we could take advantage of and leverage. Broda?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One of the things I've been talking to Adam about, and Adam is really upset because evenings now he just can't do anything. On Wednesday, he hopes to be able to, but not today. So, he wants to jump back in here and he wants to start experimenting more. That's a discussion we'll have more on Wednesday, I hope. But the whole point of me mentioning it now is what we talked about in our last meeting, where when you get to our experience and you have that sphere, instead of one, you will have a few spheres. I'm not saying we literally have to do that, but I'm saying that for the same data, it would absolutely be worthwhile to have different experiences so we have something to measure against. So I completely agree with that. So I can imagine in your office, Dini, in your virtual office, we could maybe even do one experience that is as basic as just overlaying it on a computer screen. So, you know, your virtual computer screen then, so it's very flat and linear. That's the basic. And then we will look at these other things. And maybe over the summer, we'll get to an experience that is completely wild. So we'll have like 2 or 3 experiences per data set. But the question, particularly for you, but also for the rest of the group, is first of all, do you think Marius will be able to give us all the papers before the conference so we can slot them in? If they're formatted in the normal ACM way, we shouldn't require any time to slot them in.
You should be able to, because I'm in charge of the awards ceremony. I have to have them in order to have people view them, right? But whether or not we get permission to use it for this purpose is a different story, and I can talk to them about it.
Okay, no, that's great. That's all we need to know at this point. The other question is then, do we agree that we should also have our meeting record be in this room? I
For
really,
the conference, I mean, for the conference or just in general?
for the conference.
No.
Okay, let me try to sell it to you then.
Okay.
One of the things in this community that we've had a problem with for many, many years, and I think we're almost solved now, is going back to see what we've been talking about. And I think academic groups will have exactly the same problem. So I think that if in our space, because it is basically text, there is a really useful way for people to view 9 months worth of record, could be really compelling for them to do it themselves. So that could be one of 2 experiences. Still not convinced, huh?
Well, I'm just wondering why they would, I mean, we can do whatever we want. I mean, that's fine, but I'm just wondering, that wouldn't be something I'd want to test at the conference. I'd want to test an ACM paper.
Yeah, but in addition, I mean, in your academic work, you have meetings, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to see the record of my meetings.
No, but I mean, there's of course just academic meetings in one sense, but there's also academic meetings for specific projects where you do want to track, right? Like this.
Yeah, I want to track all of this, but do I want to make it available for testing at a conference? Probably not. I mean, this will be something we hold on to for ourselves. Absolutely.
Well, obviously, what is released publicly will have to be vetted by all the members. We'd have to go through and make sure there isn't anything misconstruing us or that we don't want public. So, you know, that in itself is important, let alone any other aspect of it. But, you know, I can't imagine, for instance, the prompt thing that I just did on has, what does Fabienne think of this? Or what has Rob changed over the 9 months? That kind of stuff can be really, really useful, right? And I don't think we have anything to be embarrassed about in this group. We've been learning. It may just be a really good case study system for how to build an interaction, because technically a prompt can do anything, but that's just a prompt. But to have a space, you know, a calendar, and, you know, maybe different people. This is all about Dini. This is all about the time. This is all about the subject Sloan. This is about the subject symposium. These are the changes based on these people. These are the connections. It's an incredibly interconnected network of thought that can probably be more visualized in a spatial environment.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I think it's great. I'm just saying that it's not something I want to bring to the conference. I want to test a paper.
The problem I
That's
have
what we've been
with,
talking about.
the problem I have with papers by themselves is that, first of all, many of them are irrelevant to a specific reader, obviously. You know, not every paper will be relevant for every reader. There'll be different constituents. An academic paper for hypertext, it's not that long. There aren't that many pages. So, and also, in terms of the corpus of all the papers for that year, to see the interconnections may not be that useful. I do think we can augment the reading of these papers and the creation of these papers. but I don't think it really shows off a huge volume of information presented in a more interactive manner.
So I'm imagining, I guess, what we talked about earlier. And I was imagining that we have a library and we have a listing of papers that people can read, right? Mark has gone through a lot of trouble to give us the data for that. And we put the headset on someone and we say, okay, here's the library for you to choose from. Pick a paper. And we're not going to give them like thousands of paper. We pick like a variety, like maybe 5 to 7. We say, now pick a paper that you want to read. And let's watch you work through this, right? And so they tap on one of the papers. It opens up. And then hey, how are you? It opens up and then they work through reading it, right? They swipe or pinch and do all the different actions. And then we talk to them. It's like a talk through protocol, which is what we do in usability testing, right? A talk aloud protocol. You know, what do you see? What are you experiencing? Okay, what are you clicking now? You know, what do you think about this layout this way? And just walk them through that. And then we say, okay, now here's that same list. Now let's put you in this environment. And then let them try that environment. So one with that skeuomorphic, which you prefer, one that's less skeuomorphic, and one that's extremely, just spatial, like I like. We just take them through 3 different scenarios. But
Danny, I agree. And just to summarize for Brandel, who was there, hi Brandel. We're talking about a few different things, primarily what to show at the Hypertext conference. And Danny brought up the point that we shouldn't show just one interaction for the same data. We should have 2 or 3 different types of interactions so we have something to measure against, which makes complete sense. Fabienne earlier showed walking around in a physical environment where there's documents, on walls, so to speak, and you point to one and then you're teleported to read it, which is really beautiful. It's a Memory Palace thing. So what we're talking about now is also our meeting record. So the meeting record I have in Author, it's gone through the whole Claude thing. So there is a hierarchy of sections for it. And Brandel, specifically, you have to make sure you're happy to make it public. If we make it public, it's not public now. But one of the notions is that because we have you had a chance to see that PDF, by the way, Brandel?
No, I haven't had a look at the PDF.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. While I'm talking, I'm going to give you the HTML version, shock and bold. So what we're debating are the different values of what to show, because I'm quite excited by the process of our meeting records now. So in summary, what I do is we record here, upload to YouTube, which takes a couple hours, slow connection. Then I go to sonix.ai, get a transcript, and it has speaker 1, speaker 2. I just put all the right names, check if there's something awfully wrong, save it. Then I upload it to claude.ai, where I run one prompt that has a lot of context, many, many questions, and then it gives it, and I put it in an ever-expanding document, right? Point of it is, I'm really shocked at how good it is, and I will be uploading as quickly as I can after every meeting now, so that everyone will have a chance to see if something's wrong based on their memory. Add manual stuff. If someone writes a note, I'll just paste it in. It doesn't have to be pure AI. So one of the things that can be done, in addition to the ACM documents, is provide an environment in XR to read our record. Because we can navigate based on dates, people, changes, topics, and so on. This is something you've been working on, Brandel. So you have any thoughts on this? And good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I got to say, my hostility to artificial intelligence makes it very difficult for me to find any particular merit to any form of summary that comes through it. That's not to say that there isn't anything there. It's that it's not something that sort of jumps out at me. My preference is for things that are manipulable and that have the capacity for being under the user's control. And so to that end, it's trivially and obviously true that something that has some manner of AI for the recognition of tokens that can be kind of separated and split has merit. But yeah, and like I said, like it's clear to me that there is much more to AI than I see, but I don't see it.
Right. So on that note, I saw Fabienne had a icon for that as well. There's two aspects that have surprised me recently. One is, and this is a great example. Randall, you and I had a disagreement from use of terminology a while back. AI found that. Not just this word was blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like data robot thing. It actually found it and said there was a disagreement between these people on the use of terminology and had to do this. So that to me was a bit of, seriously? Right? That was wow. But the real use, I think you and I are completely aligned on, and that is basically entity extraction, right? So that it can be manipulated. One of the key things I find interesting is that I asked, by the way, the prompt is on the last page of the document, so you can read it there and please suggest edits. I'm very happy to. So for instance, you go through one meeting and you can see that so-and-so person was mentioned. Even in just Reader, you can select that, the Command F, and you see anywhere else it was mentioned. Right? But I think it would be much more interesting in an XR environment to have a pile over there of people mentioned, dates here, all that kind of stuff we talked about. So that means that you can choose to do the kind of interactions you're talking about. All the AI should do is not to give us a summary from its great intelligence and wisdom. Absolutely not. It should allow for these interactions to be possible.
Yeah.
Right. So
No, that does make sense. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm trying to find the file, but it isn't. I guess it must have been made a while ago because I keep failing to actually find it in my downloads. Well, because the modified date is a while ago, I'm guessing.
I'm giving you both in our chat here, the HTML and the PDF now, so you can download it from the chat. They're tiny documents.
Yeah, no, I have downloaded it several times. I still can't find it.
Isn't it exciting that the meetings.index.html is an HTML? Come on, Fabian, you should give me like a high five or something. Right. So anyway, we can, those of us who want to can continue working on the how to read the record as a separate thing and then see if there's an interesting overlap. But definitely we need to keep working on the different ways to experience the ACM documents. And Dini, I'm going to give you the mic, but just to make it clear for everyone, we're going to try to get the ACM papers for this year. That'll be the primary reading experience with the library of everything else, right?
Yeah, and I'll reach out to Marius about that today. I also want to mention to the group that you have been invited to be the keynote speaker for the human workshop that Klaus Azenbeck puts on every year. And so my question will be, what will be the difference between your talk and our paper? Are you thinking about what you're going to be talking about now? I know we're meeting with him sometimes this week, the two of us.
It
But
depends.
we got three things going on at the conference, and we want to make sure that we're writing for the right thing when we write the paper.
It depends very much on whether he's going to fail me or not. He's my external examiner.
I'm sorry, I'm not following. If he invites you, he's inviting you as the chair of a conference proceeding. Are you going to hold that connected to your dissertation?
Not at all, but it would be quite annoying if he fails me and I have to go there and talk about his academic stuff. It's just an amusing situation to be in a relatively closed academic community where, people collaborate on one side and then judge each other on another side. Don't worry, Klaus and I have a fun argument over this. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Of course, I'll present. Of course, I'll do my best. And it may very well be that considering we're all in this together, if you want to, we can work on making that presentation the dialogue maybe. I don't know. Dini, what do you think?
Well, I guess my first question is who's all going to write the paper? We have a paper to write, the Blue Sky. Who's all going to be part of that, and who's going to take the lead on it? That's
I'll
the
take-
practical stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the human thing, I can take the lead on that, and I'm extremely happy for anybody who want to join. For the main paper, I'm guessing that will be you, Dini, who will take the lead, right? Because you are the lead.
I guess so, but who else is writing on that paper with me? I'll start a Google Doc. Anybody else want to write on it besides me?
Why don't you put together a basic outline or something and share it with the group so that they know more of what that would mean?
Okay. But we
Yes.
want to make sure that they're different, that your presentation is different, and you'll have to publish your presentation. Guys, there's nothing you do at the ACM conference that is not a published element. When I did the exhibitions, I had to write a paper, I had to publish a paper with it. And so it's a really strange phenomena. So I just published my curatorial statement, but it's very strange. You can't even give a demo without a paper, as Rob and I learned last year, right, Rob?
And of course, the irony is that the discussions after the presentations of the papers in the group is not recorded. And that's where some of the good stuff comes out. So it's a bit frustrating. It's something that Mark Anderson has brought up a few times. But yeah, okay, why don't we say this? The way that we record the meetings will probably be the human presentation. You see, Brandel, one of the topics from the beginning today was kind of a provocation on what might be the ultimate, hang on, I'm just going to give you another link, the ideal document. And I'm not talking about document format, I'm just talking about what should it be able to do. And clearly, one of the things is spatialized information. And I use the example, and this is what I'm sending to Apple via Bruce Horn, as in please make it possible as part of a long list of vision issues, is the conference we were at last year, some of us in Rome, how to write a report of it. A little bit of writing, a little bit of citing, a little bit of pictures, but Rome is a special place. Maybe you'd want to put pictures or spatial videos on the locations where you shot them. Maybe you want to do that kind of stuff. Maybe you want to have a glossary in space, all these things. It seems like a mentally good case study for what should a spatial document be able to contain and present. So that's partly why we're going all these trips at the moment. And considering what you've done with timelines, Brandel, I think it would be really fun with you to start looking at our record. You know how
Yeah,
to
so I finally found the file. For some reason it was its modified date was old. I guess because it was modified at some point in the past. I don't know.
we're talking
and,
about the HTML or the PDF?
Yeah, no, the HTML. It was no, it's modified at today at 9:27. I don't know why it wasn't turning up as the most recent file. I don't keep a clean enough set of
Okay.
directory structure that I could find it. My downloads file folder is thousands long at any given time. No, this is super interesting. I also bought new AirPods, by the way, at your encouragement. So I'm still back through these and hopefully I'm audible. Yeah, this is really interesting in terms of it's much closer to the tokenization that you can use to be able to kind of construct that. At least these names were mentioned. It's likely it doesn't have who was present, does it? It just has what
It does.
people spoke. It
It-
says, I guess, a speaker summary.
If you look at okay, just tell me what date you're looking at. So we're looking at the same thing.
Let's see. Say 3rd of April.
3rd of April, right. So on 3rd of April, what this means is, of course, link to the video and the transcript, which we may or may not want to make public for everything. And then there's a list of speakers or people who were there, followed by one basic summary.
Yeah. Okay.
On the,
No, that's cool.
on the next page is just copy and paste for Andrew's update. And then we have the names for speaker summaries. And then we have the topics discussed as now. And then the thing that I think is quite interesting is the names mentioned, because it also says who mentioned it.
Mhm.
And so on. So if you want me, Brandel, to change the, oh. Yeah, Dini had to go. Sorry, I didn't even get to wave by. If you want a different prompt, we can obviously change that for your analysis or visualization.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm pretty distracted at the moment. I am making a .dc talk, and that's kind of a meat grinder. But but it seems like it would be really interesting to iconify the regular suspects and to identify ways of pulling other people in and turning that into a graph. And certainly a number of those moving parts are better addressed by this summary than other modes. So yeah, that'll be fun to be able to play with. Yeah, I won't have the capacity to play with this for another month or so at least, but it does look cool.
That's fine, and we're kind of slightly running out of them up. In this context, I'll just show you 2 slides, guys. You can all see this? Okay. So one of the frustrations I have with vision and any headsets is touching things. The eye tracking and pinching for a lot of stuff is fantastic. A lot of the stuff, it's not very good. And I think that's a limitation of the universe rather than necessarily Apple. But anyway, so in these 2 slides, this is on a Mac. On top, there are some tabs. All they are saved search terms, nothing more fancy. But imagine you click on those, or you type in to search for the word hypertext, for instance, and you get this. There's 2 aspects to this. One is the way it's listed. So it shows authors, and then the title is a link to open the document. Below that is a 1-sentence AI-generated summary. Then you have a list of keywords, names, and if there were any highlighted text. So this is an experiment in what could be basically useful to decide what to do. But the reason I'm showing you this today, and the new thing that I'm trying to build, is that in this search result, you can select text. And if you do Command F, it'll search anew based on that text. So I think that can be quite powerful. So let's say you've searched for this, you come across David Orchard, for instance, you have no idea what that is or who that is. Select it, select that text to Command F, and it does a new search based on that. So you can keep navigating through the information. I'm hoping that for our, hang on, just want to make sure I'm back with you guys. For our own meeting record, we can do something like that, but more interestingly in XR. You come across something and you pivot around the whole view based on that. Right. If, as has been asked before, if anybody has any ideas to write down a user scenario of specifics or to for specific attributes the ideal document should have, please tell me. I'll add it to our webpage. And also, who here has interest in working more on the how to visualize our own record? Hello. So Peter sounds good. And Brandela says not for the next few months. And Fabian is
Next month.
Next month, okay. And Fabian says something. Isn't that aspect interesting for you?
But I'm not sure I understood. You mean our data set as like the discussions?
Yes.
No, it's not. I don't think I don't see how to visualize it beside like some back and forth, and I'm not sure what could be beside manually doing it. I mean, and that's like crafting a completely unique experience more than a tool. So could, I'm not sure how to do this. It's not it's a data set in the sense that collecting any information can, if it's done regularly from the same sources, is a data set, but I don't see how to do this. I can put like literally the transcript back and forth, but it would be up to the user to then, and it's too big. Like I don't think it's feasible. So that's why I stayed silent.
Okay, on that topic, first of all, if we could solve the meeting records issue, we would have $1 billion company on our hands. We all agree on that. I'm half joking only. It's a big issue for a lot of different groups. Just doing it in text is not ideal. The current way we have it is absolutely not perfect. But I can tell you that I think it can be a tool or an environment that can be generalizable. I can imagine something basic like you have a wall of the speakers. You could even put pictures on them if you wanted to make it custom for yourself. That would be one fun thing. So you walk up to one speaker and then you can interrogate the whole data set based on that person or two persons, that kind of stuff. I could imagine having a magic carpet like Randall did for us, where different attributes mean different things, and you have that available. So in other words, doing a lot of AI, not just one or two prompts, but doing a ton for a report stage. Let's say report stage is every 6 months. So you can ask it, based on this, has so-and-so changed? Has this and that changed? And then to have ways going back at it. But I think the key will need to be getting molecular stuff out. In other words, a name or a date. So we can do lists and interactions rather than full sentences, which requires more reading. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, so I think it is the more I look at it and the more I think about it, the more it would be possible to do things like, the very first thing is to take the participants and give them a frame, and a picture, and encourage that to be like get them for anybody who's recurrent, and then for names mentioned as well to be able to build a graph of that, and just looking at the agreements and disagreements. Yeah, I mean, the challenge, like Fabian said, is that a data set is a data set, and whatever commonality there sort of is to any given set of data sort of defines the perimeter around which you can kind of use a formalism that that is relevant to the totality of it. Like, if it's all common enough in a certain form, then you can come up with some kind of solution that visualizes it. And so, if we have these, if enough of this is recognizable for enough of these meetings, the suggested next agenda, the chat logs, the agreements and disagreements. What do we have in other weeks? New understanding.
New
Agreements and
understanding might be the
disagreements. Okay, so
weakest one, but it was fun.
yeah, and to the extent that so like, I've done a bunch of stuff in the past with not even AI generated, but just Google searches, Google image searches of search phrases and things like that, and those are sort of similarly valuable for a prompt of sort of being able to conceptualize things. And so, yeah, I think those are that would be an interesting thing to be able to cover. And then there's, you know, data that is more trivially like extractable from the chat video, like the total duration or the number of speakers maybe. I mean, it would be really nice if Zoom gave that. It strikes me as the sort of thing that Zoom should be able to provide a lot more support for, and it's frankly suspicious that they don't. But yeah, like yeah, I just haven't really put my shoulder against the problem yet. So I think there's a lot that could be done with this document. There's a lot that could be done with what Zoom should by rights be able to provide by default. So you know, the individual speaker time, cadence, and order of people. It may not have a like Zoom will have a perfect record, as in not even in dispute of who spoke for how long and in what order. What, you know, what becomes a little bit more tenuous is what they said. And more tenuous still is, for example, the relevance of one person's statements to the next, or the tenor and tone of those statements. And so if somebody is just engaged in flat out contradiction with somebody else, sorry if I've done that in the past, then, you know, that's a relevant kind of data point to be able to kind of aggregate the overall tone of the meeting. So you can kind of go from the bottom up in that way. But some of these top-down things that the AI summary has are pretty cool to be able to pull out as well. The fact that it exists as a YouTube video means that there are potentially things that you could get out of that as well. If there's something that happens to have been somewhat more traveled in terms of the analytics across it, then that would be fun to be able to pull out too. But yeah, no, I think that it's an interesting data set to be able to kind of walk over as an exemplar. I'm with Fabian in that beyond it being a data set that happens to have some characteristics, there's nothing in particular that I would expect to be revelatory about doing this work, other than doing a better job of reading a transcript and summary than people have done in the past. And that's appealing. But I like to just make a lot of interesting half-finished stuff and move on. And so I haven't generally been in the business of sort of poring over the exhaust from that process. So I don't know whether I would expect to get great revelations from being able to go over the transcript, but willing to try at some point. Like I said, I will. I'm a little busy, but I will get to it with whatever time appears between now and like 4 weeks, and certainly we'll have more time after.
So I think what you said there, Brandel, is important. And I spoke that sentence partly as a test for Claude, because now we'll see if in the transcripts it points out that what I think you just said was important. I'm
That would be
partly
neat.
doing it as kind of a half joke, but also we discussed quite a while ago having a grammar for a normal transcript, like we use the word important. So I think that prompt engineering, as they pretentiously called it, is going to be very useful here. That if we want to highlight, if someone expressly says, I'm not interested, or this is important, or whatever, we can make this AI be very basic, which I think would be beneficial rather than to try to make it think, which is kind of our job. So both your and Fabian's concern about over-analysis, which may be wrong, hallucinating, or incomplete, completely agree. But I don't think we should throw this particular baby out with any particular amount of bathwater. So my background is that of an artist, so to speak, Chelsea School of Art and all of that. I'm used to vagueness, you know, painting, you know, like this and getting something. I don't necessarily need neat in this sense. So my approach to AI is that they are rough tools. what you get back is literally black and white text, but they are still rough tools, and we should treat them as such. You know, like try to get an impression here, but I really want to re-emphasize the importance of you guys being able to email me a paragraph, either saying that was wrong and I'll delete it, or here's what I really meant to say and I'll put that in. Because the benefit of HTML obviously is the linking. So we already have Andrew's demos linked from our meeting record, which I think is quite fantastic. From any demo you can see it. And if there's demos being done in this, if we just put a link in our chat to a video of it or that demo, that's going to be on the list for that meeting too, automatically. That I think is going to be useful. Fabian has done quite a few demos which have not been captured in this because this one has no images, it's just text. But if there's links, they will be there, so that'll be useful. Anyway, something to experiment with. And I could imagine, Fabian, that in your job dealing with a political reality, that this is something like imagine half the people you work with would love, half the people would absolutely not love it at all. But for the public to be able to have summarized sessions of the parliament that you're a part of, vetted by the people who were there in the future at some point, may be useful, may be scary. But the key being able to always have access to the source.
So, I mean, I don't want to talk about this because I don't think it's feasible. I think the need for it is there, of course. I agree. The thing is to do it where there is no hallucination, as far my technical understanding goes, even though it is not my specialty. That's not how the technology works. It even like summarization, we don't know, as far as I know, beside having a human being. And it's exactly the question I asked you on Slack a couple of days ago when you shared those transcripts and summaries, because most of it sounds right, which is already amazing, but it's a world apart from being being truthful, like all the time. Because if it's totally different if I read the transcript and then, oh, Freud said this, and you actually never said this, and I have to, every time I read a single line, say, is it actually what was meant? And I just cannot go back and forth and ask you every time, and then every time I'm in a kind of in between states of like, maybe he said this and maybe actually you didn't say it, but it's still interesting, and my interpretation of it might lead to something useful. But it's so there is a need for this. I'm not questioning that at all at the parliament and elsewhere, everywhere. The problem is that I don't know professionally how to make that work, and my understanding of it and the discussion I have also with experts is that we're not even closer than when we were 10 years ago to this. So it sounds plausible, and it might even be feasible. I'm not saying it's not feasible at all and or never will be. I personally don't know how to do this, so I'm not going to promise this to you or anybody else. If it does become possible that the summary is all the time, or like 99.9% of the time, the shared understanding of how humans who did participate to the discussion and have like it would be vetoed, that would still be interesting, but it's still a risky situation. So sure, the need is there. I just don't know how to do it.
You use the word summary. I think that's a dangerous word because that is not what this is. Some of it is summary. And I do also have a lot of grains of salt when I touch that. There's two things I think are really important. One is the thing of the loop of each of us checking after each meeting when it's relatively fresh to see if something egregiously wrong. The other thing is, if you look at this, a lot of it is entity extraction. And I think that's useful. Like if you look at our Monday a week ago, Ted Nelson mentioned by me in the context of Zigzag. I said that. David Bellos, right? Douglas Adams, Vint Cerf, blah, blah, blah. These are really useful things. And there is not a lot of AI involved. It's just, these are entities, they're listed. Under disagreements and new understanding, yeah, that's a lot more nuanced, of course. But if you look at the speaker summary, it's pretty good. I mean, look at the one for you. 'Cause
Yeah, but
you-
okay, just to go back to repeat also what a bit Brendel said and to be a bit more direct. I like to play with things in space. I'm not saying everything else or anything else is not interesting. It's not my focus at the moment. So sure, I'm not suggesting to throw anything with anything's water or baby's bath, but it's just not my focus. That's it.
No, I understand that, and I'm not going to try to ram it down any further throats at all. The only thing I was referring to was the veracity of the record and how that A has to be changed and B, entities are simpler. I do, however, have a feeling that for the entity extractions, that can be playing in space. And I can imagine that, for instance, maybe the topics become instantiated very similar to your knowledge blocks, that they have programmatic characteristics to them, and to be interactable in that way. Right, so I'm looking at both people in space, a record, a diary in space, but also the concepts in different ways, concepts/entities. And with what you've done, that's a provocation for me in a good way. But we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe we'll record the weekend you're here in London and you'll say, I desperately need to visualize this.
So I like to visualize stuff, and I like to visualize stuff that I have structure, but it's not like I don't have a visual manipulable summary of it in my mind. So this I do, but it's like somebody who is not me. If you give me, let's say, a graph of a text or some content with, for example, entities that have been extracted before, ideally validated by, let's say, an expert of the domain, but it's okay without, I can do something with this. But with just the text as is now and timestamps, for example, it's a couple of levels too raw for me to do something meaningful with it. So
yeah, no, that's fine. That makes sense to an extent. Oh, that was Andrew leaving, right. Right. Now, also, finally, I'm sending the document to Apple regarding my experience with the Vision Pro. The two main things I'll be mentioning, one is, please, can we have some window management? Please, can we have some way of storing layouts, because they get lost after a while, which kind of defeats the purpose. The other one is, when there is a trackpad attached, please, please, please override the eye, at least within that area. Too often I'm writing something and suddenly I'm writing in a different location. You know, these kinds of things. But if any of you have any other specific things you'd like to add, please do tell. And Brendel, I'll be involving you because you're already over involved in our group. I'll be doing it via Bruce. So it has a different way in, unless you want it done differently, of course.
No, I think that's great. I think Bruce presumably also has a fair bit of clout in terms of being able to slip things to folks. I bumped into him the other day, but I don't think he recognized me, and it was I'll have to say hi now that he's actually in our group properly.
Oh yeah, no, you should say hi. I think he's got a lot on his mind at the moment. So whenever I say, should we do this? Yes, next week. So I can imagine he's walking around with too many thoughts to see who's in front of him.
Yes, that's believable.
So now, for the record, I look forward to saying the important bits and see if Bruce Horn is going to be listed in as one of the named entities. See if that works. But we are excited about the notion of the ACM library, I hope, visualized. And if there's anything else anybody wants to work on that's related to this at all, please let's discuss that and do that. Hopefully in a week, I'll be able to show you a better version of Reader in Vision. Currently, we can lift stuff, but it doesn't appear right. And that may address a little bit of what Dean is talking about. And so on. Yeah, Brendel, on the Vision, to get it into kind of fix itself mode, what do we do? Press both buttons for a long time or something? Because I had to do that this weekend and I accidentally found how to do it. I just don't remember how.
Do you mean putting it into force quit or DFU,
What's DFU?
device firmware update. It's where you intentionally brick a device in order to be able to force an OS onto it.
No. Basically, this weekend when someone I was testing on people, they did the environment and it was just black,
Uh-huh.
and it just didn't function right. And also the OS was filling up the entire 512 gig with nothing. So it just didn't work. And then I pressed buttons, and finally it said, please remove while in maintenance mode or whatever. And it did all kinds of stuff and fixed itself.
Oh, okay, that sounds like it was resolved. I'm not familiar with that particular mode. I tend to just power cycle, unhitch the cable in order to reboot. There is a way to do it, I believe, without and possibly just doing some buttons, but I'm not familiar with it. So there is a thing that is a public-facing thing for all Apple devices called Device Firmware Update, where you do some complicated sequence of buttons, and that will force it into an update where it will be able to accept an OS update. I'm not familiar with what that looks like for Vision Pro, and I don't know how you would do that without the developer strap. So,
Okay. Yeah, I do want to that developer strap. That also means faster connection when doing a virtual Mac display, right? Faster view connect.
I don't know what it means for the public.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, we have to close up. Fabian, considering all the discussions today, what aspect of this work, the Sloan-related work, do you consider most relevant and interesting to you?
Getting Dini's step, like how she's going to grab a document and manipulate it with her bibliographic tool, like a Zotero equivalent, and see how. I don't want to presume too much, but to me that would be the thing where that would be most interesting for me, and I would hope I can do some most interesting prototypes.
Exactly what do you need from Dini? Just to have it really clarified.
She sit down at 8 a.m. or whatever in her office. She has a goal for the day. So, of course, everything that's not related to research directly, like writing a grant or whatnot, I mean, that's, of course, core to her work, I imagine, or same meeting students, etc. But it's not manipulating the type of academic document I think we're interested in. So we skip all this. But let's say if she has to produce an academic document, write an article, for example, for the upcoming conference, what are the steps? And what are the steps with reading existing documents or finding those documents and then extracting or highlighting or adding any kind of annotation? Does she do it over a single screen, multiple screen? I think she said multiple devices. So basically, as if I was behind her shoulder to see how she was manipulating academic documents and library of academic documents, like her own, how she collected papers over the years, and if she browsed Science Direct or whatever, or anything really, or physical magazines also, if there are publications in her work that are still in that form, and how she then put those different documents or part of documents in a space, maybe a directory, and then how she go from this to an ID, how she writes the ID down, like a sequence of words, maybe drafts, or and then insert them one next to each other, for example, to have the different sections, and all the way to finally publishing the paper. I think that's what I would see, and then we would discuss to see are there a couple of those steps that would be the most beneficial to her to do with a headset, and then finding the easiest, cheapest, fastest way to test this. Like can be taking the cover of each paper and then displaying it on a virtual whiteboard, and then she tries it and it's like, no, it's not at all what I wanted, and then we try to iterate from there. That's what I would need.
So on Wednesdays, one of the slots is exactly that. It is use cases. Will you be here this Wednesday?
I'll try. I cannot say for sure. Let's say if you tell me that she can address that, answer those questions, I would try even more to be there, but I can't promise anything.
Okay, but feel free to ask her exactly this in exactly your words, because it's very important, and it should not be a more generic use case. All right, thanks, guys. Look forward to seeing you Monday, Wednesday, whenever you can. Bye for now.
Bye bye. Take care.